Today we're going into Psalms 39. It's a very interesting psalm. It begins with, I said, I will take heed of my ways, I will sin not with my tongue, and I will keep my mouth with a bridle, while the wicked is before me. The idea of here's a man who's bridling his tongue, who's watching what he's saying. And it's interesting because there's a parallel here with the book of James. The book of James talks about bridling the tongue. And the idea that this is an Old Testament parallel to where we see that we need to watch what we say, how we say it. I was done with silence. I held my peace, even from good, and my sorrow was stirred. My heart was hot within me while I was musing. The fire burned, and when I spake, I then spake I with my tongue. The idea that he got himself all worked up and lathered up, and then blah, out he went. We've all done that. This is not what we should do. We should be people of slow to speak, slow to anger. We'll find that his son Solomon will repeat certain words again later on in Proverbs of a man being slow to speak, slow to anger. We shouldn't take anger, it says in the Bible later on, in your anger sin not. It's not a sin to be angry. It's a sin to let anger guide your mouth. Emotion should lead to action, not emotion just for the fire of the emotion. My heart was hot within me. Lord, make me to know mine end. He's talking about the things that we're fighting of. We have to realize and pull ourselves into perspective that many of this vanity, most of it is uselessness, fighting over who has the most power, who has the most this, who has the most that. You did this to me, I did this to me, I did this to you. When basically our days are numbered, our days will pass. We're like the grass. We're like the lilies of the field that are here today and gone tomorrow. Remind me of that so I don't get all wrapped up in what's going on. Surely man walketh in vain. The word vanity is useless. It's purposeless. To do something that's purposeless and useless is to do it in vain. When we speak of taking the Lord's name in vain, we're not talking just about profanity. We're talking about taking it in a useless way, taking it carelessly, without any regard for its power. Well, I'm just going to ask for this, but I'm not going to work for it. I'm just going to seek this, but I'm not going to, you're asking in vain. If I'm asking for help but not willing to help myself in an issue, it's vanity and it's uselessness. We need to be careful when we approach the words of God, that we approach these words with usefulness. But he talks about this. For every man walked in vain, surely they are disquieted in vanity. They heap up riches that knoweth not who will gather them. The idea of building up all these riches, but you don't know what's going to happen. This is also paralleled when we look at the book of Ecclesiastes. David's son Solomon will also write that book, which is again vanity of vanities. All is useless. What's the purpose of life if you build it up, but you don't know if the next person down the road is going to use it for good or use it for evil, destroy it, go back to zero? Many times we get wrapped up on thinking we're going to make great strides in this world when sometimes our work is in vain. It's vanity. It's purposeless. I've seen people raise houses and raise properties only to have them destroyed by their children or laid waste as they sell it to someone else. These things happen, so we have to be careful where we put our energies. And remember, he says, deliver me from my transgressions. Make me not the reproach of the foolish. I was dumb, I opened not my mouth because thou did it. When God does something, again, we can just close our mouths. It is done. Remove thy stroke away from me. I am consumed by the blow of thine hand. When thou with rebukes dost correct man for iniquity, thou makest his beauty to consume away like a moth. Surely every man is vanity. The idea that men think they're beautiful, they think they've done this, they think they're wise, but God rebukes them. He makes their beauty to fade away like a moth. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear unto my cry. Hold not thy peace for my tears, for I am a stranger with thee, and a sojourner like my fathers. He's remembering that he is no better than his fathers, that many times he is a sojourner, that he is the accompanying God. Oh, spare me that I might recover strength before I go hence and be no more. Again, spare me, strengthen me before I'm going to be no more. Again, he's looking to God, and he's trying to watch his ways, watch his tongue. It's a very powerful psalm because it gives us the truth. This is, like I was saying, it's like a pre-Ecclesiastes truth about the vanity of man. And I think it's a very interesting connection. When we go back to Exodus, and here we are with Exodus 27. We left, again, there's that in Exodus, they come out of Egypt, they'd gone through the Red Sea, they're out in Mount Sinai, they've been to different places, and now Moses went up the hill. He got the 10 Commandments and some other laws about property, laws about how they treated one another, laws about what is murder and what is thievery, some basic laws, that this is the covenant. And from this covenant will grow more laws and addendums, if you will. They don't change the law, they just more focus in on what the law, how their law will work, how it will affect, how it will look in society. And then we had 24 where they met with God, the 70 elders, representatives of Israel, and with Moses and Aaron and Nabib and Abu, which was Nadab and Abihu. Goodness sakes, I'm going to get these right. Nadab and Abihu, and these were the sons of Aaron. So they went and with God, they slayed the blood of the lambs. They set up this covenant based on blood. They agreed to both sides of the agreement. And then, of course, they feasted. I don't know if God ate or not. Jesus did eat with the disciples after his resurrection. God did eat when he came down and met with Abraham. I'm not sure if they ate with this, but there was a fellowship meal made. And so that's, again, both sides being at peace. It's a form of Old Testament koinonia, of setting down to feast together. And then Moses is called back up. But now we start, like we said, we started not with the economy or the governmental structure or the security. We start small. We start with first the Ark of the Covenant. Then it branched out to the things within the tabernacle. Then now we looked at the tabernacle. We looked at this tabernacle, which is 10 by 10 by 30, so it's like a giant bread box, how it's overlaid. It's overlaid with garments that are made of blue, purple, and scarlet that intertwined very beautifully and put across the structure. Then you had the goat's hairs, the ram's hair dyed red, and then badger skins for weatherproofing. Very smart. I can't get past that one. And so here we begin looking at the altar. Now we're going out even further. We're looking at the an area. So the grounds, if you will. First he creates an altar, and it's going to be made of brass, not gold and silver, because they're going to heat up, and this is where you have the burnt offerings. It's going to have a grated work on it. It's going to be made of shittim wood, dipped in brass. Again, you can't use gold and silver. It'll melt. Brass has always been a symbol of judgment, and this is a place where the sacrifice will be made. There's flesh hooks, and there's going to be pans, and there's gratings, and they have staves on the side, and the staves are made of brass. They're wood covered with brass. We're looking at the courtyard here. He creates a courtyard where it expands out even more. We'll see this courtyard is 100 cubits, and then it's 50 cubits. So working that out in yards, that's 50 yards by 25 yards. And this fencing will be 7.5 feet tall when we're looking at this, just to put it in our easy to understand lengths and measures. Again, this courtyard will be covered with the same material that God used to cover the tabernacle. It's, again, when you're going to see this covering is the same. It's this beautiful embroidery where they've had this purple, scarlet, and blue covering, and they're going to use this same covering to cover the to cover the tabernacle. Then they'll use it to create the fence. Then it's going to be a covering of, when we get to the priestly garments, for Aaron and for his sons. And when later on, when the Levites come in to be the priest, they will also have the same covering. Again, very beautiful. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to 28:40, where it says, "And for Aaron's sons thou shalt make coats, and thou shalt make them girdles and bonnets, and Thou shalt make for them for glory and for beauty. God enjoys beauty. God enjoys the beauty of what he's very into aesthetics. He created a beautiful world. He created us to be beautiful people. If you know anything I've discussed earlier about the golden mean, the golden ratio, this is a mathematical precision of what our eyes find aesthetically beautiful. If you look, it's the shape of a ram's horn or the shape of the inside of a perfect wave. I believe that women are covered with these implied curves in their hairs and their eyes and their bodies, and they're very beautiful to a man's eyes, to attract a man to women. And it's interesting that God does this beauty to attract man, and because he is a beautiful God, and he wants to share that, and he created a beautiful world for us to see the beauty in. But it is the ugliness of sin that brought ugliness into the world. And so here we have this courtyard is created. Again, you have the fence. They also make oil for the lamps. They're going to have a lamp out there. You know, you have the candle that's burning all the time within the tabernacle. But you also have an oil lamp where there's always light outside. And again, who is the light? The light is Christ. The idea there's always light at the tabernacle. You could think that all the homes would have fire, and they're going to maybe have different lamps here and there with oil in them, trimming their lamps. You get the idea that people did use oil lamps. There's always light. There's always brightness at the tabernacle. So he creates this, that they will have this light, and it'll burn always, burning day and night. It's a statute forever that there's always light in the tabernacle. When we look at the priestly garments in 28, although it's a long chapter, there is a lot of good YouTubes. There's a lot of good information on this. I didn't want to get too deeply into it. The idea where he's telling these people that Aaron and his sons, they're making holy garments, garments that set them apart. And again, they're making the garments, again, of the same. You're going to make an ephod, a girdle. You're going to embroider a coat. You're going to have a mithra, something for the head, and a girdle. You're making holy garments that set them apart. And you'll use gold and blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen. You're going to weave these together just like you did for the rest of the tabernacle and for the courtyard. And he talks about making an ephod of onyx. And it's interesting, I was doing a study here, that onyx is a black stone. And it's almost like a chalkboard, if you will. It's not a chalkboard, but you get the idea that it's a black stone that people have used for embroidery. They've used for to create cameos and other kinds of jewelry where you can write on it or you can put other pictures on it. So it's made for being written on. So they embroidered the names, and also you're going to see what they're going to give the names of all the 12 tribes on this ephod that they'll wear in their chest. And you're also going to have certain beautiful stones that are used for each name. So you'll have a name and a stone under it, a name and a stone under it. And this is worn for when the high priest goes before God in the holies of holies. He is representing Israel. He is representing the entire nation of Israel here, the sons of Jacob, before God. So it's, instead of sending every man through or having every man be a priest, he's got this one man representing everybody. And who is the one man that represents out of everybody? Who is our high priest? Although he's not an Aaronic high priest, he's a Melchizedek high priest. Once again, getting ahead of myself. But seeing these parallels that God is making with the law, that reveal Christ. He talks about how to make the breastplate and the different stones that you use. And you could do a study on this to say, why do you have this stone for this name and this stone for this name? Maybe reveal something about their character. There's certain depth here that could be gone into. My job here is not to take all the depth. My job is to kind of give the grid work. If you want to stop and look at this, there are several good YouTubes. There are several good websites. A lot of good stuff here. It talks about how they use the chain mail to hold it on, how they're going to fasten it. Then it talks about the Urim and the Thummim. There's two stones where God will speak through the stones, lighting them up. This is a very supernatural connection. It was used at times, in specific times, for specific ways. So that is there. We talk about the priestly robes. We talked about the ephod, and we talked about the girdle. Now we're talking about the linen underneath. So you're going to have to wear clothing underneath this thing. So he talks about making an ephod of blue, which is finely woven. It doesn't have seams. Just has a hole for the neck. It's one piece. Remember Jesus' garment? When he was crucified, they didn't want to tear his garment because it was one piece. It was like one piece of fabric that someone had cut out a hole and created embroidery for the head to go through, and he wore this thing. It's funny that Jesus did look like a form of a high priest in what he wore, because he wasn't wearing a garment. He was wearing a garment similar to a high priest garment. He wasn't wearing a garment that was, like most people would have worn, that would have had either sleeves, so you can see the stitches going down the side. He had one piece. You've got that same thing going here in light blue. Blue is often the color of man. Man is, the idea of this is the manliness with the godliness on top of it. So we have this, and there's going to be a hem around it, which has little bells that ring when he moves. So you could always hear these people coming. You always knew who it was that was coming around the corner. This was also for when he went into the Holy of Holies, that you could hear him as he went in. So all of the priest, and we as priests, as the ambassadors, should be having our holy garments on. I know Ephesians 6 talks about wearing, the warrior garment, if you will, but also we should have a priestly garment. People can hear us coming. They know what we're about. And these bells are there. They have bells and a pomegranate, so they would ring when they walked. And he has a blessed plate that says, holiness to the Lord, holiness to Yahweh. And you'll put in the blue lace, and you'll put upon the mitra and upon the frontlet of mitra. And he wore this thing on his forehead. Again, similar to what we've said is, the breastplate of righteousness and the shield. You see a parallel here between the priestly garments and the spiritual warfare garments of Ephesians 3. There's kind of a parallel running here. And you're covering your head. Your head is covered with the knowledge of God. Your head is covered with the protection of the knowledge of God. If you're in war, you have the protection of the knowledge of God. In Ephesians 6, if you're in peacetime, you have a protection of the knowledge of God with this mitra on. It's very important. And they made these for their sons, again, for glory and for beauty. And so he made these for their sons. There's an interesting thing here in 42, where it says he wants to make sure that they might wear undergarments. So when they approach God, there was a scripture earlier that said God did not want to create stairs up to him. So you'll find that the tabernacle is ground level. So men will approach in. You don't go up steps. You go right in. But he also said, so your nakedness may not be seen. He says that thou shalt make them linen breeches to cover their nakedness from the loins to the thighs. You almost get the idea here that, we see forward. It's very possible when God sees, he sees all sides at one time. He sees me from the back, me from the sides, me from the top, me from the bottom. And here, when you go into his holiness, you cannot have your nakedness be seen, before God. This is an interesting implication here of how holy God is, that we don't bring our nakedness, we don't bring our sinfulness, we don't bring our comeliness. We bring only the beauty that he creates to him. And that's not saying that men's bodies aren't beautiful. But what I'm saying is, in relation to the holiness of God, God creates beauty for man, just like God created the beauty of Christ for man, and not the nakedness of our own sin. So I think it has more to do with the flesh and sin than it has to do with any kind of impropriety. And this shall be upon Aaron and his sons, and when they come into the tabernacle of the congregation, or when they come near, or unto the altar of the ministry in the holy place, that they may bear not the iniquity and die, and it shall be a statute unto him and for his seed after him. So notice he's saying that you will not bear the iniquity. He does not want you to die. He's setting up the rules of approaching him. We don't get to make up those rules. That's the problem between religion and this relationship. God is setting up his standard. We think that we can just barge right in and sit next to him and everything's going to be fine. He's created his standard so that we might approach him. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He talked about There is one door. Anybody else is a thief that tries to go over to the side. So the parallels here in the New Testament are very strong. I also had a picture I was going to show you. Got this from the internet, just an idea of what he would have looked like for some of you that might want to look at this. Again, there's a lot of good pictures about this. This one's not in color. There's beautiful color pictures. Again, this is the Aaronic priesthood, and God is setting it up so that man may approach him. Thank you.